Our next guest is going to be very, very busy very, very soon. And all signs indicating that an election call is coming. Of course, we've got our insider in New Brunswick, right? Jim Zant says that we're going to have this election call on August 15th. That's what Jim's aunt said in New Brunswick. Let's find out from one of our favorites, a political poll prognosticator from 338canada.com. He contributes to Macleans and to L'Actualité, among others. Philippe J. Fournier is on the line. PJ, what's up?
Good morning, Elias.
Listen, I want to dive right into it. Your latest in L'Actualité talks about Justin Trudeau's risky bet of if he calls an election now. What do you mean by that? What do the polls say?
Well, we have to preface this by saying that, yes, the Liberals are in the driver's seat right now. In polling intentions, not only nationally, but also the regional numbers show that overwhelmingly the Liberals are favorite to win the most seats. However, Elias, they already hold the most seats in the House of Commons. This election will be about whether Liberals get a minority again or a majority. And a majority is still hard to get in the current landscape.
So why is it hard to get in the current landscape? What's standing in the Liberals' way of that majority that they so want?
Well, I would say this. First of all, we have to remember that in the 21st century, there have been 5 elections, and 3 of them have been minorities, have resulted in minorities. And so perhaps with a healthy Bloc Québécois in Quebec and the NDP not completely disintegrating like it did in the 90s, getting to the majority threshold of 170 seats is very hard. If the Bloc Québécois wins again, maybe 30 seats, if the NDP wins 30 to 35 seats, and the Conservatives still have their base in Western Canada, which almost guarantees them 90 to 105 seats, it's really hard to get to 170 for any party. And so I think majority governments will be the exception, not the norm in the coming years. And in this election, unless one of the 3 opposition parties disintegrates or completely collapses, it's going to be very hard for the Liberals to reach that 170 threshold.
How have Canadian voters been treating governments that call snap elections, that decide we want to go to the polls? Well, what does the past tell us?
Well, that's very interesting because I've seen many columns in various newspapers reciting those numbers, citing Pauline Marois in 2014 or Peterson in Ontario a few decades ago. There are some examples of a snap election backfiring on the sitting government. But if you look at the pandemic elections that we had in the past year, British Columbia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador, all those 3 provinces had minority governments going in. They went into election, and the incumbent was reelected to a majority each and every time. And so, and I could add Saskatchewan also to this, although they already had a majority, the Saskatchewan Party, which is a conservative party. And so, from the NDP in British Columbia to the Conservatives in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick and the Liberals in Newfoundland and Labrador, all of them were elected to majorities. So, maybe the precedent here is that the incumbent will be favored in a pandemic election. But it's hard to understand the thinking here, but that's what the recent precedent is.
We're with Philippe J. Fournier from 338canada.com. Philippe, what's so interesting here is that, you mentioned the elections that have happened in provinces and so many parties went for minority, getting that majority because time of crisis, right? People want to sort of, my feeling is, time of crisis, people just want to have somebody to lead and give people the power to do the right thing during a crisis. I almost feel here, Philippe, I'd love your thoughts, that perhaps the Liberals have waited too long. Like as we get further and further away from crisis and from pandemic heyday, we get into sort of normal times where voters are more inclined to not go with, okay, whoever's in power, give them more power. Am I off base here? What do you think?
Well, I think it's completely defendable as an argument. I could see that. However, we still had in the spring problems with vaccination. The vaccine rollout did not start until March. Mm-hmm. And also there was a budget in April that had the Liberals showing Canadians, we have a deficit of hundreds of billions of dollars. Not a good time to go into an election if you're a Liberal strategist. And so you could say that right now Canada leads the world in vaccination, and that would be, of course, something that you will hear often from Liberal hopefuls in this election. Perhaps it is too late, but there's a window right now that I see. Some people are very cynical that the reason we're going to election is just because the Liberals could win. That's one thing. But also, if we wait until 2022, Ontario is having an election in the spring. Quebec is having an election in the fall. Those elections are scheduled. And so, of course, if you're a federal government, you don't want to go in at the same time as those provinces. Or you could just wait it out for the full 4 years and wait until the fall of 2023. But I don't think the Liberals wanted to do that.
Philippe, you got the most wonderful Twitter to analyze Canadian politics. 338 Canada, at 338 Canada, for those of you who want to follow. Here's one line from one of your recent tweets. Remember, campaigns rarely end the way they began. Okay.
That's true.
So, but what's interesting is I look at the poll numbers over the last year. They seem remarkably consistent.
Absolutely. Nothing has changed, or very little has changed since the 2019 election. There was a bump at the early in the pandemic for the Liberals. Last summer, they were projected over 200 seats, but it has come down, but it has not come down completely. And if you look at the elections, again, the federal elections of this century, 2008 is the only election where the numbers at the end were the same as they were in the beginning. That's the only federal election where that happened. So it's an exception. And we could see flat numbers during this election. I'm just warning people that if that happens, it's the exception, not the rule.
Mm-hmm. Now, PJ, do you have any little birdies speaking to you in your ear, like our Aunt Mo in New Brunswick, who says it's going to happen this weekend? Any birdies telling you when we'll have this election call?
I had some birdies telling me it could start tomorrow. But again, I mean, I don't think anybody knows to the day, but it will be before next week for sure. We're eyeing maybe an election either September 20th or September 27th.
Very, very, very interesting. Philippe J. Fournier, it's so great talking politics with you, man. Thanks so much.
Talk to you soon, Elias. Thank you for having me on.
Check out PJ Fournier's writings in Macleans and Actualité and that amazing 338canada.com.